A 16-year-old serving time for a string of violent offences breaks another lad's jaw and gets wished happy birthday by the judge. A Gwent police constable dismissed, barred from policing and given a 9-month restraining order for harassment. Metropolitan Police's head of drug strategy suspended over drugs misuse allegations. Hertfordshire police constable sentenced for inappropriate relationship with victim of crime. And the Police Federation back a campaign for harsher sentences for cop killers, putting what's seemingly less value on the lives of the public. This and much more coming up. Please don't forget, these reports are daily, Monday to Friday. Please remember to subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss any future uploads. And if you appreciate the work I do and understand that these topics result in little to no YouTube monetization, please consider joining the channel Patreon for as little as £3 a month to help me continue providing this content. Hello ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, innies, outies, and of course, the in-betweeners. My name's Dan and welcome back to another PAP Reports. It is Thursday the 6th of August 2020. A 16-year-old who was serving a 12-month sentence for robbery, who had 5 previous convictions for robbery, has been spared further jail for grievous bodily harm with intent by Judge Catherine Tolk at Aylesbury Crown Court. The boy, who can't be named, was at the time serving his 12-month sentence at a secure training centre in Oak Hill. The court heard he had been passing a ball around as part of a group of 5 on the centre's AstroTurf last September when he and another teenager rushed at one of the other players, also in a secure unit, punched him to the ground before kicking and stamping on him. James Bloomer, prosecuting, told the court the group together went to the AstroTurf football pitch. There was then an argument, whether begun by comments or in whatever way, which ended with the victim being punched to the ground and then kicked and stamped on by this defendant and another. He suffered a broken jaw and a root fracture of the tooth. Judge Catherine Tolk heard how the boy had admitted causing grievous bodily harm with intent after watching CCTV footage of the attack. Judge Tolk told the boy if you were an adult, you would be looking at a starting point of 12 years in prison. Instead, however, Judge Tolk said that she thought a youth rehabilitation order was a fitting punishment, saying that it will expire the day before your 18th birthday, which I think, given the growing up that you have done over the last 9 months or so, coupled with the growing up that I have absolutely no doubt you are going to do in the next 12 months, I think it's only right and proper that the day before you become an adult will be the day that a line is drawn under what happened during your childhood. Judge Tolk also gave the boy an order, which means that he has to be supervised by a youth offending team and wear a tag for 3 months between 8 p.m. and 7 a.m. The order will last until the day before his 18th birthday, and he must also pay £2 a week in costs. The boy was told by the judge that she would be willing to vary the times of the curfew if he wanted to undertake football coaching after his release. My God, I grew a bit of weed and they certainly wouldn't give me any flexibility when I was on tag and curfew. In fact, they even come knocking on the door because I took the bins out one night. Speaking of the incident, the judge added there has clearly been something which has been going on in the days and hours leading up to this, as I suppose in some ways it's not particularly a surprise. If you put a group of teenage lads into an environment, whether that is a posh fancy boarding school or a teenage training centre, the relationship between those teenage boys is going to lead to conflicts and to arguments, sadly sometimes to violence. What may have come as something of a surprise to everybody was the extent to which the victim was injured. So what's the answer? Dispose of prisons and secure training centres? Don't get me wrong, I understand that young kids need a break sometimes, but giving a break to someone who broke another kid's jaw is too lenient. The lad who had a string of violent offences, if this was a single punch or if he headbutted him in a rage, then I can see the need for alternative punishments. But this lad and another punched, kicked and stamped on another boy's face until they broke his jaw. That's not a playground scrap. Now, I've never been to jail, so it's easy for me to say how I feel about this. I understand that people who have been in jail might have a different opinion, which I'd like to hear in the comments, but I simply can't see how someone with a string of violent offences and who, while serving a sentence, violently attacked and fucked up another, gets off so lightly. Nor do I see how it's going to teach him not to do it again. Can somebody please explain? Let me know in the comments. Now, it would appear that Matt Hancock and the other cretinous lowlifes in government have realised that the gradual shutdown and elimination of our rights is no longer going to work. After first introducing legislation for Leicester, a specific piece of legislation for the city in order to hold the residents to ransom by removing their rights under threat of extortion and or violence, it seems that maybe Hancock has realised that locking cities down one at a time is an arduous task, and because of the snow nature of having to pick a likely target and then introduce legislation to fit that city, they've now instead jumped in feet first and have created the health protection coronavirus restrictions on gatherings north of England, Regulations 2020, which has been introduced to cover the entire north of England at the government's whim, including Bradford, Kirklees, Calderdale and Greater Manchester following a supposed spike in COVID-19 cases. And of course, anyone found flouting the restrictions could be fined £100 and up to a maximum of £3,200 for repeat offences. Now, there are exceptions to these new rules. Not that it matters, because if something is as serious as being made out, then there wouldn't be exceptions. But, government knows best. Those exceptions are: if someone is giving birth and the person attending is attending at the person who is giving birth's request; if a person is visiting a person they reasonably believe is dying and the concerned person is a member of the dying person's household; or they are a close family member or a friend of the dying person; a person is fulfilling a legal obligation; if the gathering is for work or education purposes or voluntary or charitable purposes; or for the purposes of childcare provided by a person registered under Part 3 of the Childcare Act. To provide care or assistance to a vulnerable person, including personal care; to facilitate a house move; to provide emergency assistance; to enable one or more persons in the gathering to avoid injury or illness or to escape a risk of harm; to continue existing arrangements for access to and contact between parents and children where the children do not live in the same household as their parents or one of the parents. All of which would be a great way for the corona to travel between people and infect them. But shh, don't tell corona. I don't think it's quite worked that out yet. Of course, police and PCSOs have been given the power to intimidate and extort anyone who hasn't got a reasonable excuse. And they're still using that bloody word. An excuse intimates you've done something wrong before being found to actually have done, anything wrong. They've also introduced into the legislation a part that will prohibit people from their right to protest by prohibiting the gathering of more than 30 people. But, 29 people gathering just isn't enough people for corona to worry about, and it will simply bypass those groups on its search for 30 or more people. Police leaders say they have been issuing guidance to forces on how to enforce restrictions each time a new coronavirus law has been introduced during a pandemic, so the constables know the powers available to them and in what circumstances they can impose fines in a bid to ensure any action taken is fair and appropriate. But yet police, who are wonderful pillars of a community that we look up to for help and guidance, just ignore the guidance and carry on making things up, bullying and harassing people who have no real recourse for appeal against the treatment from the police. Well, while everyone's nodding their heads and chewing the grass with their butts in the air, the government continue to collude behind the public's back, creating more ways to alarm, confuse and strip us of the very fundamental rights that makes us a civilised society. It's only a matter of time now before the South, East and West have their own prohibition notices. In fact, the government declared a major incident in Manchester over the weekend, which is the same measures that will be used in the event of a terror attack or major flood, and means the region can access extra national resources if necessary, including military support. Does anyone else see why the government are pushing for testing now? TV adverts, radio adverts, internet adverts. Get tested, it's free, blah, blah, blah. This is so that the more people tested, the more people found to have corona. Even those with antibodies, I might add. And then it seems like more people are infected, which gives them the opportunity to shut entire cities down. I mean, so what if people have tested positive for the flu virus? That's not an important number. The important number, as far as I'm concerned, are hospital admissions and deaths from corona, not deaths from people who once upon a time had it. And in line with the government's usual tactics, after there being comments about blamed communities being more at risk and being the ones most likely to flout the legislation, The white community is now being targeted, saying that it's now predominantly white areas too. Well, sorry to say that Caroni doesn't appear to be being racist anymore, as the public health director says she hopes that this is a warning for complacent white middle class people. Have you all noticed how at first it wasn't affecting children, and when people started to question this, it suddenly started affecting children, although younger children don't have to wear masks and can go back to school? Have you also noticed how it was affecting the BAME community disproportionately, and when that was questioned, it suddenly started affecting more white people? This is supposed to be a virus. It has no brain. It has no reasoning skills. It simply reproduces. It doesn't care if you're old, young, fat, thin, black, white, tall, short. And the sooner people start to realise that and stop blaming each other and stop ignoring your own logical reasoning, the better. On the 1st of July, we briefly touched on the fact that Cleveland Police, the only police force to ever be branded failing in all areas, saw Christina Emsley, the force's head of ethics, suspended from her role. At the time, the force would not confirm the identity of the suspended member of staff, but it was widely believed to have been Emsley, which turned out to be right. Emsley was said to be drafted in by the force after it disbanded its discredited professional standards department following a number of scandals. Professional standards? In a scandal? I don't believe it. Anyway, the investigation, which at the time was said not to be criminal at that stage, was sent to the IOPC, who have now given Cleveland Police the go-ahead to investigate one of their own themselves. Can't see anything wrong with that idea, can you? Gwent Police Constable 48-year-old Gareth Hodges was, on Wednesday the 5th of August, dismissed, barred from policing and given a 9-month restraining order by a misconduct panel after being proven to have committed gross misconduct. Hodges is accused of causing a single mother to live in fear after he repeatedly sent unwanted calls, texts and emails for 2 weeks, culminating with him threatening her and turning up uninvited to her home. Hodges and Mrs. X, as she had her identity withheld, were in an on-off relationship for around 7 months before Ms. X decided to call it off. Hodges, however, ignored her request by repeatedly attempting to call her, as well as sending WhatsApp messages, letters and 17 emails over a 12-day period. One of the emails sent to Ms. X said, "I hope you live your life with full regret that I could have provided what you didn't have in your life." What a narcissist. Following an uninvited visit to her home, the woman reported PC Hodges to police on May 16th, who arrested him under Protection from Harassment Act. The hearing was told that PC Hodges was given a 9-month restraining order related to the woman at a magistrate's court, despite the police officer being acquitted of harassment. Bryony Ballard, who was presenting the case, said the woman was vulnerable after experiencing domestic abuse at the hands of her ex-husband, and that PC Hodges should have recognised his actions had the potential to cause her to become distressed. We don't suggest it's targeted or calculated with known intent. We say a reasonable man would or should have recognised it would have caused distress or alarm, and he accepts that, she said. She added, he is a very experienced officer. He's had 15 years service on frontline policing. He's well aware of legislation which protects individuals from harassment. In a witness statement, the woman said she felt scared PC Hodges would do something to harm her or her children. Typical police: find a partner who's vulnerable, someone with low self-esteem, who's been ground into the dirt by another already. Certainly saves you doing a lot of the work yourself, doesn't it? 41-year-old Christopher Lindsay, a legal consultant, well, I'm presuming that means that he's not a brief, but maybe something like a Mackenzie friend, was arrested by Northumbria police after arriving at South Shields custody suite for a legal consultation. Although at first he was simply questioned as to his fitness to represent his client, to which police deemed he was, they later observed him getting behind the wheel of his car and pulled him over because they believed he'd been drinking. This is like those idiots who get nicked for driving without a licence and drive to the court without a licence. A breath test was conducted and police say he was found to be more than twice the legal limit. Lindsay has now been banned from driving for more than 3 years after magistrates heard it was his second drink driving conviction in just over 2 years. What is it with people who deal with the police? Even I know you never give the police any ammo to use against you. However, it's alleged by Lindsay that when police spoke to him in the station as to his fitness, he allegedly offered to take a breathalyser there and then, but his offer was turned down. His defence said it's surprising that the police would have that suspicion and still allow him to get in his car. Is it though? Is it really surprising that they could have prevented him from committing an offence rather than risking people's safety in order to allow him to commit the offence? I bet there were a dozen cops that night arguing who was going to sit off and wait to pick him up and then bring him back to the station for another hour or two off the actual streets. Why didn't police take his offer? And then they could have had him for driving there, providing they could prove he did. Or they could have taken his keys away from him. Several routes to take that would not involve risking people's safety for an easy nick. A 55-year-old Police Scotland constable based in Ayrshire, believed to be a sergeant, has been formally arrested and charged with alleged racist communications sent to other officers on WhatsApp. A Police Scotland spokesperson said a 53-year-old police officer has been arrested and charged following a report of racially offensive communication whilst off duty. Racism in all its forms is disgraceful and unacceptable. Police Scotland is committed to relentlessly improving how we reflect, represent and engage with our communities, and to ensuring Police Scotland's 23,000 officers and staff uphold the values of human rights, fairness, integrity and respect. It is understood that the officer is currently on restricted duties following the allegation was then reported by one of his colleagues in Ayrshire-based U Division to Police Scotland's Professional Standards Department. A Metropolitan Police Commander, Julian Bennett from Scotland Yard, who led the force's drug strategy and heads misconduct hearings, has been suspended over allegations of drug use. How ironic. In a display of ever-increasing transparency from the police force, Bennett was secretly suspended in July, following claims about controlled drugs. It's been said that he was suspended due to his refusal to take a drugs test after a tip-off about alleged substance abuse. Bennett now faces an internal investigation by Scotland Yard's Directorate of Professional Standards, despite the fact that part of his role is actually acting as the chairman in misconduct proceedings. Oh, the irony. Known within the force for his harsh rulings, he was once the subject of a Freedom of Information request about how many officers had been dismissed under his watch. That revealed that 2/3 of the hearings he chaired resulted in a constable being fired between June 2010 and February 2012. Bennett, who's been married 3 times, obviously forgot he was at home and sacked them too, has served in a number of high-profile positions since he joined the police in 1977, including running the operational unit which planned for the 2012 Olympics. On Monday, Scotland Yard confirmed that a senior officer had been suspended after a referral to the IOPC on July 22nd, although that referral was not made public at the time. The Independent Office for Police Conduct said the matter had been assessed and referred back to the force, just 2 days later for internal investigation. A Metropolitan Police spokesperson said the force's own probe is underway, adding the officer has been suspended from duty. An Essex police constable has been the subject of a misconduct hearing over allegations he committed gross misconduct. PC Simon Jones is said to have abused his position as an officer with the Essex Police by behaving inappropriately towards 2 women he came in contact with during his duties between September 2018 and December 2018. Based at Braintree, Jones was found to have conducted a personal and sexual relationship with a victim of crime and sent personal and sexual text messages to another at his hearing in Chelmsford Civic Centre, although due to the fact Jones had already resigned, he didn't attend the hearing himself. After being found to have breached professional standards, the hearing chair said he would have been dismissed without notice had he not already resigned. Reading straight out of the Chief Constable's Damage Repair Guide, Assistant Chief Constable Rachel Nolan said Simon Jones' behaviour was completely unacceptable. He abused his position as a police officer to pursue a personal and sexual relationship with 2 different victims of crimes. These 2 women needed our help and support, and Mr. Jones took advantage of their vulnerability in order to form personal relationships with them. We expect the highest professional standards from all of our officers and staff, and when behaviour fall below those standards, we take the appropriate action. The vast majority of our officers and staff are professional and diligent, and they work hard every day to protect people, keep them safe, and to catch criminals. Behaviour such as that from Mr. Jones undermines the good work of all those people and will not be tolerated, and therefore he wouldn't have been dismissed if he hadn't resigned. 51-year-old Hertfordshire Police Constable PC Nicholas Mustoe, someone we spoke about in PAP Reports on the 3rd of July, where he admitted misconduct in public office at Peterborough Crown Court, was due to be sentenced on July 17th. However, assuming the delay due to coronavirus, he was sentenced on Friday the 31st. Mustoe's charge comes after he was found to have had an inappropriate relationship with a victim of crime that he came into contact with via his operational police work. Sounds a bit like PC Gareth Hodges we just spoke about from Gwent Police. Although PC Hodges didn't get done for misconduct in a public office. The IOPC was said to have investigated the allegations of Mustoe in October 2018 following a voluntary referral from Hertfordshire Police, where they uncovered that Mustoe had lied about the nature of his relationship with the victim, where concerns were previously investigated in 2013. Assistant Chief Constable Bill Jeffson said this has been a distressing matter in which a vulnerable victim of crime has been abused in the most appalling manner by someone in a position of trust. As a force, we expect the highest standards of conduct and will always take action when those standards are not met. In this case, PC Mustoe not only betrayed the trust of his victim, his predatory behaviour has had a damaging impact on public confidence in policing, which is totally unacceptable. Now that the matter has been dealt with at court, PC Mustoe will face a special case misconduct hearing. Mustoe was initially sentenced to 18 months on Friday, but this was reduced to 15 months due to his early guilty plea. I think that should say Mustoe was initially sentenced to 18 months on Friday, but this was reduced to 15 months because his sphincter won't be able to take 18 months of battering after he's made the prison wing bitch when they find out he's a copper. Now, it's always nice to see and hear when someone takes responsibility for their actions, and I have to say I'm impressed by Luton Mayor Tahir Malik, who was pictured and videoed at a gathering breaking the rules of the local lockdown after the area had been designated an area of intervention by Public Health England. Mr Malik said, "There is no excuse for what I did. I should have known better, and I accept full responsibility for my actions." At last, someone with some integrity. Maybe he should now apply for the police force. Maybe he can teach them a thing or two. I know we can all make mistakes and no one is devoid of them. What makes a difference is whether you can admit to those mistakes or not. In a statement on Luton Borough Council's website, Mr Malik said his actions had been below the standard of my position. He said standing down was the best thing I could do for the town. He added he hoped his actions would serve as a reminder to the people of Luton of the importance of following the COVID-19 guidelines, as it remains a real and serious threat. Well, it certainly serves as a reminder of what integrity is, but maybe we should keep COVID-19 out of it though. Labour's Hazel Simmons, they really need to change their name from Labour, as the word Labour relates to slavery, said Mr Malik had made a mistake which he deeply regrets and that he and his family are really hurting right now. She added, "What has happened is unfortunate and I think it is right for him to step down at this time. But it's important to recognise the fantastic contribution he has made to Luton." Opposition Lib Dem leader David Franks said the matter was not over. He said it would help if the local Labour Party would make it clear what action it is taking. This period of silence raises suspicion of an attempted cover-up. What? The guy stepped down, which is far more than most would do. I've respect for him for admitting his mistake and taking action rather than simply arguing and actually trying to cover it up. Luton's new mayor will be appointed on the 29th of September. Priti Patel has been calling out Sadiq Khan over accusations he's threatened to cut the number of police in London. Patel said that crime was up in the capital despite London having the highest police funding settlement in the country and a cash increase of over £190 million this year. Adding, astonishingly, we had a mayor threatening to cut the number of police officers on the street of London just at a time where across the country the public are rightly seeing more police officers on the beat in their local communities. What the hell do they need that level of increased funding for? Crimes are down across the country with the potential for this lockdown to get worse with a supposed second wave, which will see far more draconian moves implemented by the government and no doubt see the entire country in a lockdown, similar to the 2016 film Viral, where the CDC delivered food packages to people's homes in order to prevent them from even having to leave them. In fact, the police are so bored over the past months, they've had to turn to enforcing rules rather than laws in order to extort money from people. And they need a cash increase of £190 million and the highest police funding in the country. The mayor accused Boris Johnson of riding roughshod over local leaders after plans for an M25 quarantine ring around the capital were reported in the Sunday papers. Meanwhile, ministers have accused the mayor of playing politics. Patel made the comments as she introduced the Tory mayoral candidate Sean Bailey ahead of his speech at the Centre for Social Justice. A spokesperson for Sadiq Khan said Sean Bailey simply has the wrong values for London, and once again put his political party ahead of the city today by standing next to the Home Secretary and refusing to urge her to properly fund London's police. Even the current mayor has got the wrong values to be Mayor of London. The police service of Northern Ireland are to meet with a Sinn Féin delegation this week over the arrest of a 14-year-old boy with special needs. On Monday, a 52-year-old man was arrested at a house in Cregan during a raid by the Police Service of Northern Ireland's Terrorist Investigation Unit investigating dissident Republican activity. During the search of the address, police arrested and handcuffed a 23-year-old and a 14-year-old on suspicion of assaulting police, although both were later de-arrested. However, Sinn Féin MLA Karen Mullen has raised party concerns over the conduct of the police during the raid, and said that a party delegation will meet the PSNI this week to directly raise concerns about reports of heavy-handed policing during a recent police search in the city in which a 14-year-old child with special needs was arrested and subsequently released. This vulnerable child has been very badly affected by his ordeal. The public rightly expects a very high-list policing and human rights standards, and we will hold the police to account when their actions fail to meet those standards. Chief Superintendent Emma Bond said accountability to both the public and the relevant oversight bodies such as the Northern Ireland Policing Board, Policing and Community Safety Partnerships, Police Ombudsman and local representatives are at the heart of our policing with our community approach. Protecting the public and keeping people safe is and always will be our priority, and we welcome the opportunity to meet with Sinn Féin representatives to discuss this matter and any other concerns they wish to express. It makes me wonder how someone can be said to have assaulted police and then let go without any further action. Surely if they've been released without further action, they didn't do it. Therefore, shouldn't the police constable who arrested them for said assault be investigated as to why they said they were assaulted? I get that sometimes police will simply tell people off without a caution or further action, but there's nothing about the 23-year-old having special needs, so surely they would have been charged if the assault actually took place. Now, I think this is a growing problem where police overreact to someone, say pulling away when they're trying to arrest them and twist them up into a stress position. The body's natural reaction is to fight back to get out of that stress position, but police seem to love abusing and the assault and resisting arrest line to teach people a lesson, to a natural bodily response to their heavy-handedness, and to even consider it on a child of 14 with special needs, which either the police would have been able to see or one of the men would have mentioned, is abhorrent. But I bet the cop who arrested the lad felt like a real big man afterwards. I'm becoming increasingly concerned about how quickly the police are becoming a protected group. I mean, they're already protected, but it seems like they will soon be added to the list of protected characteristics. PC Andrew Harper's wife, clearly very upset with the death of her husband, a death which clearly shouldn't have happened, is campaigning for Andrew's Law, which would see tougher punishments for people who kill police. Now, I fully understand that police should be respected and looked up to. They used to be, but they're no more special than you or I, apart from the fact that they're immune to much of the law themselves. Andrew Harper's widow, Lizzie, and his mother are calling for a minimum term of 20 years for anyone who takes an officer's life with no chance of parole during that time. A campaign which is being backed by the Police Federation and is due to meet with Boris Johnson and Priti Patel in coming weeks. Newbury Today, a news outlet, is running a poll on the website which is asking the public if they agree with the campaign, asking if people think it's a fitting punishment and would act as a deterrent, whether sentences should be consistent for all killers no matter who the victim is, or whether they don't know. Currently, the majority of idiots who read the article are pushing for police to be treated special and members of the public punished more harshly for killing a cop than one of their own, with 67% agreeing. The police are already looking for harsher sentences for assaults on police, which is clearly going to be abused to punish people. And this campaign too, which is simply putting police on a pedestal, is just asking for trouble. Now, I want to be clear here. I am sorry that Harper was killed. However, the facts are that he got tangled in some tow rope and dragged down the road. Yeah, the lads could have and should have stopped. But had he not got snagged, he would still be alive. Not that I'm saying it was his fault, by the way. And his death may have been prevented if the boys stopped, but that's not certain. Although they shouldn't have been doing what they were doing in the first place. If the boys had intentionally killed Harper, as with anyone murdering anyone else, they should of course see the inside of a concrete box for the rest of their lives. But to suggest that if the situation was reversed and it was a cop who killed someone, that they would have a lesser sentence is absolutely ludicrous, and I think it should be stopped. Under the law, everyone is equal, or at least that's how it should be. We've seen over time how the police have been given, or the government have been given extra protection to those with certain characteristics, but to move as far as to protect the police more than they already are and treat them more special than the people they are supposed to be protecting is absolutely crazy. In fact, the police should be dealt with more harshly when they break the law, as they're the ones that are trained to uphold it. They know better than most what is right and what is wrong, although many consistently get away with breaking the law and committing crimes against the public. But yet they get little to no punishment. Now, I'm not considering going and doing any cops in. However, this certainly shouldn't be allowed, as it simply puts a lesser value, in my opinion, on the life of you and me. And that's not in line with our human rights or the law. Big thank you to all of the supporters of the channel, especially channel Patreon supporters. Your support is, of course, truly appreciated. And that's all I have for you today. Please like, share, comment and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts, as I know many of you will. Until next time, stay safe, look after each other, film the police and other officials.
Good night, all.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you like the content and you'd like to help support the channel, you can do so. In the description of every video there are some links to ways that you're able to help support the channel so I can continue putting out content. If you're unable to help us in that way, hit that subscribe button up the top there. If you haven't already, become a subscriber. That is support enough. Share the videos, comment, like, it all helps. If you're looking for something else to watch, up top there is my latest video. Down the bottom there is a video that YouTube recommends for you.